So over the weekend, Donald Trump canceled his Chicago rally because protests and clashes got out of hand. So much of the crowd were Trump supporters, much of the crowd were protesters, and it was loud and it was boisterous, and at times it got physical. So in some instances, it was the protesters who got physical and crossed the line. There were plenty of examples of that. And in some instances, it was the Trump supporters who crossed the line. So it's hard to say in totality, hey, one side is totally right and one side is totally wrong. It looks like both crossed the lines at different times. At times, the protesters kind of became rioters and did violence. At times, the Trump supporters did violence. That should be totally unsurprising to you guys, given the fact that we've covered countless stories from Trump rallies where, for example, his supporters sucker punch people in the face. But the Chicago police actually cleared Trump to do the event, and he decided against it. He said, look, I don't want to do it because I think I might be sacrificing somebody's safety. That was his reasoning. So on this particular part of the story here, I'm 50-50. So on the one hand, look, even if I despise somebody and I think they're grotesque, they absolutely have the right to go out there and speak their mind. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, it is also freedom of speech, and it is part of the First Amendment to do free expression and free protest. And these people were protesting somebody who they disagree with. Now, having said that, while both sides have free speech rights, I would have preferred it if the protesters basically protested but did it within reason, and you're not like censoring the event to the point where it's shut down, and that's what ended up happening. Now again, the police cleared him to do the event, and Trump decided not to do the event, so you could say, hey, that's on him, he could have went out there either way. But anytime a protest crosses the line in any way, shape, or form into violence, it's no longer civil disobedience. Now you're being a dick. So it's a little bit of a mixed picture here, and you have to be nuanced about it. You have to support Trump's free speech rights, even though we think he's grotesque and horrific, and he is those things. But he has a right to speak, and you also have to support the rights of the protesters. So I'm in favor of both here, and there were instances where both crossed the line. I think they were both wrong when they both crossed the line. But overall, I would have liked to see the protesters reel it in a little bit. Still do your protests, but reel it in a little bit. And don't censor the guy. Let him have his talk. And, you can keep protesting while he's doing it, and then everything will still go fairly smoothly. They'll escort you out as you protest, yada, yada. So, again, nuanced picture, mixed picture. I'm skeptical of people who are taking hard sides on this because if you're taking a hard side on Trump, you're ridiculous because this is a guy who's literally been calling for rolling back the First Amendment, saying we're going to open up the libel laws, and he doesn't believe in free speech, and he wants to bankrupt you if you disagree with him and write stories against him. So now all of a sudden they're pretending like, oh, we care so much about the First Amendment. No, you don't. You're supporting the candidate who wants to crack down on the First Amendment. So people who are 100% on Trump's side here, they're just being hypocrites and they're being ridiculous, and they think only free speech when it matters for me. But then again, people who are solidly in the protesters' camp here, you are doing a little bit of rationalization for people who go too far sometimes, and it's no longer civil disobedience, and it's censorship. And it's also, in some cases, violence that they did. So again, nuanced picture. You got to be open-minded about this. You got to be fair about this. But the next day at a rally in Kansas, Trump took it too far again. So canceled his Chicago rally. The next day he's in Kansas, and here's what he said, quote, "I hope these guys get thrown into a jail. They'll never do it again. It'll destroy their record. They'll have to explain to mom and dad why they have a police record and why they can't get a job. And you know what? I'm going to start pressing charges against all these people. And then we won't have a problem. They're probably good kids. I don't want to ruin people's lives, but the only way we're going to stop this craziness is if we press charges, because then their lives are going to be ruined. They're going to know their lives are going to be ruined. So I'll just tell you folks, from now on, if you do anything, we're pressing charges, okay?" Wow. So understand that. He's not being nuanced. He's not being open-minded. He's not saying, hey, First Amendment rights don't only apply to me, they apply to protesters. They have a right to speak their mind even if I disagree with them, and then we'll go about it in an orderly fashion if we have to remove them, so on and so forth. No, he's saying, if you try anything against me, I will ruin your life. I will sue you, and I will try to bankrupt you, and I'll try to get something on your record, and you should be in jail. Now, if you really think Trump is balanced enough to say, okay, come on now, This person just used their free speech rights against me and peacefully protested, while that person was violent and was a rioter, so lock that person up, don't lock that person up. If you think he's making a distinction there, you're fucking crazy, because he's not, and he repeatedly hasn't. He threatened to sue the Washington Post when they had a factual article on him about, hey, here's how his casino went bankrupt, and here's the terrible decisions he made, and here's how he fucked the investors and his people and walked out the back door with all the money. He's like, I'm going to sue you because I don't like your article. They're like, well, this is all public record. This is factual. He's like, I don't care. I'll sue you. I don't like it. You think this guy really is going to make a distinction? That guy's a rioter. Arrest him, which we all agree with. If somebody's doing violence, yeah, you arrest him. You think he's going to say, though, that guy's a peaceful protester, let him speak his mind? Never, never. He's telling you he doesn't believe in the First Amendment as he pretends like he's crusading for the First Amendment. There's another time where he flat out said, what happened yesterday in Chicago is my First Amendment rights were taken away from me. Whoa. Again, the Chicago police cleared you to speak, and you said you don't want to speak because you were concerned about safety. And maybe that's true. You should be concerned about the safety. But you were cleared to speak. You decided not to speak. And it's not like if you spoke, somebody's going to lock you up. That would be a violation of your First Amendment rights. And again, I'm not defending the protesters who go too far. If they riot, they do physical stuff. Yes, you could lock them up. But Trump is not balanced in this. He's not nuanced in this. If you disagree with me, you don't have free speech rights, but I have all the free speech rights in the world. So he absolutely is a hypocrite, and let's keep that in mind. He repeatedly has said he's going to crack down, open up the libel laws, crack down on dissent. So don't fall for it, this nonsense now, oh, I care about the First Amendment. And finally, get this. Here's what he said to Bernie Sanders, quote, Bernie Sanders is lying when he says his disruptors aren't told to go to my events. Be careful, Bernie, or my supporters will go to yours. Okay, what? Now, Trump likes to make up that, hey, Bernie Sanders sent these protests to my event. No, he didn't. Bernie has incited about no violence in his entire life. Of course, Bernie didn't send these people to his events. Trump makes it up, and then he's like, well, how about I send my supporters to you? And then, God forbid, the media calls Trump out and says, what are you doing? That sounds like a threat. He's like, what do you mean? Oh, no, it's 50-50 because Bernie sent them to me, and now I'm sending them to him. So what do you mean? I'm just retaliating. It's kind of like self-defense. What are you talking about? I'm just returning exactly what Bernie did. Why don't you call it out when Bernie does it? Why do you only call it out when I do it? But that's the thing. You're lying. He didn't do it. He didn't tell anybody to go to your events. You're making it up. And now he's like, no, I will. Maybe I'll send my supporters. And by the way, how scary is that, given that we know, because they tell us, white nationalists, KKK operatives, people like that are Trump supporters. Now, to be fair to him, at times he says, I disavow their support. But they still support him. It's not like, they came out afterwards and said, well, now that he disavowed us, I guess we're not going to go for him. No. So he's got these people who are crazy, who are, neo-fascists. We got the guy who sucker punched somebody in the face the other day at an event. There's been repeated violence against protesters at his events. He's like, yeah, how about I send some of my people to your crowds? But these people we know are violent. What are you doing, man? And again, I want to be clear on the record here. Anytime there are protesters against Trump who get violent, who, riot, and it's not civil disobedience, I'm against that too. We have to be in favor of civil disobedience here. But we know that Trump supporters, they have a track record of doing violence, and the ones who are going to take him up on this are not going to be of the peaceful mindset where they want to go do civil disobedience at a Bernie Sanders rally, based on the evidence and what we've seen. So, no, he's doing a veiled threat here, and this is not something that's acceptable of a presidential candidate, and it's also not acceptable that he pretends like he's such a crusader in favor of the First Amendment when it affects him, but when it's anybody speaking out against him using their rights, no, that's unacceptable. Rights for me, but not for thee. That's Donald Trump in a nutshell.